In the unforgiving world of military aviation, where split-second decisions mean the difference between life and death, nicknames aren't just playful banter. They're badges of honor earned through blood, sweat, and countless hours proving yourself worthy of the wings on your chest. But what happens when your nickname becomes the very thing that saves not just your life, but the lives of everyone counting on you? Meet Lieutenant Sarah "Sticky Six" Martinez, a fighter pilot whose unusual call sign made seasoned captains chuckle behind closed doors. They thought they knew what it meant. They thought they had her figured out. But when the most dangerous mission of her career put her face to face with impossible odds, that same nickname would become legendary for reasons no one saw coming. This is the story of how a young pilot turned mockery into mastery, doubt into determination, and a seemingly embarrassing nickname into the battle cry that would echo through military history. Sometimes the very thing that makes you different is exactly what the world needs most. The laughter stopped the day Sticky Six showed them what she was really made of. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez had always known she was different from the other pilots in her squadron, but she never imagined that difference would earn her a nickname that would follow her through the most challenging moments of her military career. Standing barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with determination that towered over men twice her size, Sarah had fought tooth and nail to earn her place among the elite fighter pilots of the 442nd Fighter Wing. The morning sun cast long shadows across the tarmac at Whiteman Air Force Base as Sarah performed her pre-flight inspection with the same meticulous attention to detail that had become her trademark. Every rivet, every panel, every component received the same careful examination that her instructors had drilled into her during flight school. While other pilots rushed through their checks eager to get airborne, Sarah took her time. She had learned early that in aviation, patience wasn't just a virtue, it was a survival skill. Captain Jake "Thunder" Morrison watched from a distance as the young lieutenant worked her way around her F-16 Fighting Falcon. Morrison had been flying military aircraft for over 15 years, and in that time, he had seen countless pilots come and go. Some were natural-born aces who seemed to dance with danger, while others were methodical technicians who flew by the book.
Sarah Martinez didn't fit neatly into either category, and that made Morrison curious. The nickname had started during Sarah's first week with the squadron. During a particularly challenging training exercise involving aerial refueling, Sarah had struggled to maintain the precise positioning required to connect with the tanker aircraft. While most pilots would attempt the maneuver once or twice before breaking off to try again, Sarah had remained in position for what seemed like an eternity, making tiny adjustments and refusing to give up. The fuel boom operator later joked that she was stickier than superglue, and the name Sticky had stuck. The addition of 6 came from her aircraft's tail number, 860156, which the ground crew had shortened to 6 for radio communications. Before long, Sticky 6 had become her official call sign, much to the amusement of some of the more seasoned pilots who saw persistence as a sign of inexperience rather than determination. Sarah had grown up in a small town in New Mexico, where her father worked as a mechanic at the local airport. From the age of 5, she had spent her afternoons in the hangar, watching him work on everything from crop dusters to private jets. Her father, Miguel Martinez, was a quiet man who believed in the power of understanding every bolt, wire, and system that kept aircraft in the sky. He would often tell Sarah that flying wasn't just about having quick reflexes or steady hands. It was about developing an intimate relationship with your machine. "Mija," he would say as he taught her to identify different engine sounds, "an airplane will tell you everything you need to know if you just listen. But you have to be patient enough to hear what it's saying." Those lessons had shaped Sarah's approach to flying in ways that weren't immediately apparent to her fellow pilots. While they saw her methodical pre-flight checks as excessive caution, Sarah saw them as conversations with her aircraft. She could detect the slightest change in engine pitch, the smallest vibration in the controls, or the most subtle shift in handling characteristics. Her intimate knowledge of aircraft systems had saved her life more than once during training, when mechanical issues that might have gone unnoticed by other pilots became immediately apparent to her. The culture of military aviation was still predominantly male when Sarah earned her wings, and she had faced her share of skepticism from fellow pilots and superior officers alike. Some questioned whether women had the physical strength to handle high-G maneuvers, while others wondered if they possessed the aggressive instincts necessary for air-to-air combat. Sarah had answered those questions not with words but with performance.
During advanced tactical training, she had consistently scored in the top 10% of her class in both air-to-ground and air-to-air exercises. Her shooting accuracy was exceptional, and her ability to maintain situational awareness during complex multi-threat scenarios had impressed even the most critical instructors. Yet, despite her obvious competence, the nickname Sticky Six continued to carry connotations that Sarah found frustrating. Captain Morrison had been one of the skeptics initially. He had seen too many pilots who were technically proficient but lacked the killer instinct that separated good pilots from great ones. Combat flying required split-second decision-making and the willingness to take calculated risks when the situation demanded it. Morrison worried that Sarah's methodical approach might translate into hesitation at crucial moments. The first real test of Sarah's abilities came during a joint training exercise with Navy pilots from nearby Naval Air Station Fallon. The scenario involved a complex air superiority mission where Air Force F-16s would engage Navy F/A-18 Hornets in simulated air-to-air combat. The exercise was designed to test not only individual pilot skills, but also squadron-level coordination and tactics. Sarah found herself assigned to fly as wingman to Captain Morrison, who would lead a two-ship element against a pair of experienced Navy pilots. The mission briefing emphasized the importance of maintaining formation integrity while adapting to rapidly changing tactical situations. Morrison stressed that Sarah's job was to stay close, watch his back, and follow his lead without hesitation. As they taxied out for takeoff, Morrison couldn't help but notice the extra time Sarah took during her final systems checks. While he appreciated thoroughness, he was concerned that her tendency toward caution might be a liability in the fast-paced environment of air combat maneuvering. He keyed his radio to give her a friendly reminder about the importance of staying aggressive during the engagement. Sticky Six, remember that in ACM, hesitation kills. Trust your training and don't second-guess yourself up there. Sarah's response was crisp and professional. Copy that, Thunder. Sticky Six is ready to engage. The takeoff and climb to the designated engagement altitude proceeded without incident. Morrison watched as Sarah maintained perfect formation position, making the tiny adjustments necessary to stay precisely where she needed to be despite the turbulent air conditions at 20,000 feet. Her flying was smooth and controlled, but Morrison still wondered how she would perform when the exercise turned into a high-G, high-stress dogfight. The engagement began with both elements approaching from opposite directions, at a combined closure rate of over 1,000 miles per hour. Morrison's radar picked up the Navy fighters at maximum range, and he began the process of sorting targets and developing a plan of attack. Sarah maintained radio discipline, acknowledging his commands without cluttering the airwaves with unnecessary chatter. As the range closed, Morrison initiated a hard left turn to position himself for a missile shot on the lead Navy fighter. Sarah followed smoothly, maintaining the proper separation while keeping her eyes open for threats. The G-forces built up as both aircraft pulled through the turn, and Morrison could hear the strain in his own breathing as his body fought against the acceleration. What happened next surprised Morrison and would become the first indication of Sarah's true potential as a combat pilot. As he focused on prosecuting his attack on the lead Navy fighter, the wingman had maneuvered to position himself for a shot on Morrison. Sarah, who had been maintaining perfect formation discipline, suddenly called out a threat warning that Morrison had missed. Thunder, bandit at your 7 o'clock low, 15 miles and closing fast. He's got tone on you. Morrison immediately broke off his attack and began defensive maneuvering, but he realized that Sarah's warning had come at exactly the right moment. A few seconds later, and the Navy pilot would have achieved a successful simulated missile shot. Sarah had been monitoring not just her assigned targets, but the entire tactical picture, something that many wingmen struggled with during their first combat exercises. The engagement continued for another 10 minutes, with both elements maneuvering through a series of complex aerial ballet moves as they attempted to gain tactical advantage. Sarah's performance was flawless. She maintained proper position when required, provided timely threat warnings, and even managed to achieve her own successful missile shot on the Navy wingman when the opportunity presented itself. After landing, Morrison found himself re-evaluating his initial assessment of the young pilot. During the debrief, the Navy pilots complimented Sarah's situational awareness and tactical discipline, noting that her threat calls had been both timely and accurate. The exercise controller pointed out that her ability to maintain the big picture while executing formation, flying, and weapons employment demonstrated the kind of multitasking ability that was essential for modern air combat.
But it was a comment from the Navy lead pilot that really drove home Sarah's potential. "That Sticky C call sign is perfect," he said with genuine admiration.
Once she locks on to the tactical picture, she doesn't let go. That's exactly what you want in a fighter pilot. Morrison realized that he had been thinking about Sarah's nickname all wrong. What he had initially seen as a sign of inflexibility was actually an indication of extraordinary focus and determination. Sarah didn't stick to procedures because she was afraid to deviate from them. She stuck to them because she understood their importance and refused to compromise on the fundamentals that kept pilots alive. Over the following weeks, Morrison began to observe Sarah more carefully during training missions. He noticed that her pre-flight inspections, while thorough, often revealed minor discrepancies that other pilots might have missed. Her methodical approach to mission planning meant that she was prepared for contingencies that others hadn't even considered. Most importantly, her ability to maintain focus under pressure allowed her to process information and make decisions with a clarity that was remarkable for such a young pilot. The squadron's maintenance chief, Master Sergeant Rodriguez, had his own perspective on Lieutenant Martinez. He had worked with hundreds of pilots over his 20-year career, and he knew that the best ones understood that flying was a partnership between human and machine. Sarah was one of the few pilots who took the time to really understand her aircraft's systems and limitations. "She's different from most of the hotshots we get," Rodriguez told Morrison during a conversation in the squadron ready room. "Half these young pilots think they know everything after flight school, but Martinez asks questions. Good questions. She wants to understand not just what the airplane does, but why it does it. That kind of pilot lives longer and flies better." But Rodriguez had noticed that Sarah often spent extra time in the maintenance hangar, observing repairs and asking about system modifications. She had developed relationships with the ground crew members who worked on her aircraft, and they appreciated her genuine interest in their work. It was the kind of attention to detail that old-school aviators valued, even if some of the younger pilots saw it as unnecessary. As Sarah's reputation within the squadron began to evolve, so did the perception of her nickname. What had started as gentle mockery began to transform into something approaching respect. When other pilots heard Sticky 6 on the radio, they knew they were listening to someone who could be counted on to do her job correctly, no matter how complex or challenging the situation became. The transformation wasn't lost on Sarah herself. She had initially been embarrassed by the nickname, feeling that it marked her as different from the aggressive, confident pilots she admired. But as she gained experience and confidence, she began to understand that being different wasn't necessarily a weakness. Her methodical approach and attention to detail were strengths that could be leveraged in ways that traditional fighter pilot attitudes could not. Captain Morrison found himself looking forward to flying with Sarah on training missions. Her calm professionalism and tactical awareness made her an ideal wingman, and her ability to maintain focus during complex scenarios had saved him from several simulated deaths during training exercises. He began to request her specifically for the more challenging training missions, knowing that her preparation and execution would be flawless. The respect that Sarah was earning from her fellow pilots came with increased responsibility. She was selected to participate in advanced tactical training courses normally reserved for more senior pilots, and her performance in these programs continued to impress instructors and peers alike. Her ability to integrate complex weapon systems with tactical maneuvering was exceptional, and her understanding of threat systems and defensive tactics was at the level of pilots with significantly more experience. But perhaps most importantly, Sarah was developing the confidence that comes from proven competence. She still maintained her methodical approach to flying, but she was beginning to trust her instincts and make the kind of aggressive tactical decisions that combat situations demanded. The balance between careful preparation and bold execution was the hallmark of truly exceptional pilots, and Sarah was finding that balance earlier in her career than most. The stage was being set for challenges that would test not only Sarah's flying skills, but also her ability to lead and make decisions under the most extreme pressure imaginable. The nickname that had once been a source of mild embarrassment was becoming a symbol of reliability and competence. Soon, it would become something even more significant, a call sign associated with one of the most remarkable achievements in modern military aviation history. The transition from training exercises to real-world operations came sooner than anyone in the 442nd Fighter Wing had anticipated. 6 months after Sarah Martinez had earned her initial respect as Sticky Six, international tensions in Eastern Europe began escalating rapidly. Intelligence reports indicated increasing military buildup along contested borders, and NATO allies were requesting additional air support to demonstrate resolve and maintain regional stability. Colonel Patricia Hayes, the wing commander, called an all-hands meeting that would change the trajectory of every pilot's career in the squadron. The briefing room was packed with pilots, navigators, and support personnel as Hayes outlined the situation with characteristic directness. The wing would be deploying to Ramstein Air Base in Germany within 2 weeks, where they would participate in Operation Guardian Shield, a multinational exercise designed to demonstrate NATO unity and readiness. "This isn't a training exercise," Hayes emphasized, her stern gaze sweeping across the room. "While we hope diplomatic solutions will prevail, we need to be prepared for the possibility that this deployment could transition from deterrence to active operations. Every pilot, every maintainer, every support person in this wing will need to perform at their absolute best." Sarah felt the familiar flutter of excitement mixed with apprehension that accompanied any major challenge. She had trained extensively for deployments, but this would be her first time operating from a foreign base, under potentially hostile conditions. The stakes were higher than anything she had experienced during her relatively short career. Captain Morrison, who had been selected as one of the flight leads for the deployment, sought Sarah out after the briefing. His attitude toward her had evolved significantly over the previous months, and he now considered her one of the most reliable pilots in the squadron. However, he also understood the unique pressures that came with overseas deployments, particularly for younger pilots experiencing them for the first time. "How are you feeling about this?" Morrison asked as they walked toward the Squadron Operations Center. Sarah considered the question carefully before responding. "Nervous but ready. I've been preparing for something like this since I started pilot training. The aircraft systems and tactics don't change just because we're operating from a different base." Morrison nodded approvingly. Sarah's response demonstrated the kind of practical mindset that would serve her well during the deployment. But he also knew that overseas operations brought challenges that couldn't be replicated in training. Different weather patterns, unfamiliar airspace, complex international coordination requirements, and the psychological pressure of knowing that mistakes could have international implications. The preparation for deployment was intense and comprehensive. Sarah threw herself into mission planning with the same methodical approach that had earned her reputation for thoroughness. She studied German airspace charts until she could navigate the complex corridor system from memory. She memorized radio frequencies, emergency procedures, and coordination protocols for operating in multinational airspace. Most importantly, she worked closely with the maintenance personnel to ensure her aircraft would be ready for the demanding operational tempo expected during the deployment. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was impressed by Sarah's attention to detail during the pre-deployment maintenance phase. While some pilots viewed their aircraft as interchangeable machines, Sarah had developed a personal relationship with tail number 860156. She knew its quirks, its strengths, and its limitations better than anyone except the dedicated crew chiefs who maintained it. "She's got that old-school attitude," Rodriguez told his maintenance team. "Treats her airplane like it's alive, because in a way, it is. The pilots who understand that relationship are the ones who come home when things get difficult." The flight across the Atlantic was Sarah's first experience with long-range deployment operations. The journey required multiple aerial refuelings and careful coordination with air traffic control systems across several countries. Sarah flew as wingman to Morrison, in a 4-ship formation that represented just a small portion of the total deployment package. The complexity of the operation was immediately apparent. Beyond the basic challenges of formation flying across an ocean, the pilots had to coordinate with tanker aircraft, monitor changing weather conditions, and maintain communication with multiple control agencies. Sarah's ability to process information and maintain situational awareness proved invaluable as the formation navigated through increasingly complex European airspace. Ramstein Air Base was a revelation for Sarah. The scale of operations dwarfed anything she had experienced at stateside bases. Aircraft from a dozen different nations shared the same runways, and the constant activity created a sense of urgency and importance that was both exciting and intimidating. The base served as a major hub for NATO operations, and the presence of so many different aircraft types and nationalities drove home the international significance of their mission. The living quarters were functional but sparse, and Sarah quickly established the routines that would help her maintain peak performance during what could be an extended deployment. She set up a small workspace where she could study mission materials and maintain her aircraft systems knowledge. She established a physical fitness routine that could be maintained despite the constraints of base operations. Most importantly, she made connections with pilots from other nations who would be participating in the joint exercises. The first week of operations focused on integration and coordination training. Sarah found herself flying complex missions that involved aircraft from the United States, Germany, Poland, and several other NATO allies. The communication challenges were significant. Different nations used different procedures, different terminology, and sometimes different radio frequencies. The potential for confusion and miscommunication was enormous, yet somehow the system worked. Sarah's methodical approach to preparation proved particularly valuable in this environment. While some pilots struggled to adapt to the constantly changing mission parameters and international coordination requirements, Sarah had anticipated these challenges and prepared accordingly. Her pre-flight briefings were comprehensive, her radio communication was precise, and her execution was flawless. Colonel Hayes noticed Sarah's performance during a particularly challenging multinational training exercise that involved over 40 aircraft from 6 different countries. The mission scenario required careful coordination between fighter aircraft, tankers, transport planes, and electronic warfare platforms, all while maintaining the complex deconfliction procedures necessary to prevent mid-air collisions in crowded airspace. Martinez flew that mission like she's been doing international operations for 10 years, Hayes told Morrison during their post-mission debrief. Her situational awareness and communication discipline were exceptional. She's developing into exactly the kind of pilot we need for these complex scenarios. Morrison agreed, but he was also beginning to recognize that Sarah possessed qualities that went beyond basic flying competence. Her ability to remain calm under pressure, process complex information quickly, and maintain focus during extended high-stress operations marked her as potential leadership material. The Air Force was always looking for pilots who could grow into positions of greater responsibility, and Sarah was demonstrating the characteristics that distinguished future leaders. The first real test came during a mission that pushed the limits of international cooperation and individual pilot capabilities. The exercise scenario involved a simulated humanitarian crisis that required immediate air support for ground forces operating in contested territory. The mission would require precise timing, complex coordination between air and ground elements, and the ability to adapt quickly to changing tactical situations. Sarah was assigned to fly as part of a 4-ship formation tasked with providing close air support for multinational ground forces. The mission parameters were challenging. The target area was located in mountainous terrain that limited maneuvering options. The weather was marginal with low clouds and gusty winds, and the scenario included simulated surface-to-air missile threats that required constant vigilance and defensive maneuvering. The formation leader was Major Klaus Weber, a German Air Force pilot with extensive combat experience who had specifically requested to work with American pilots during the exercise. Weber had a reputation for demanding perfection from his wingmen, and his standards were particularly high when working with pilots he didn't know personally. During the pre-flight briefing, Weber outlined his expectations with characteristic German precision. "This mission will test every aspect of your flying ability," he told the formation. "The terrain is unforgiving, the weather is challenging, and the threat environment is complex. I expect precise formation flying, immediate response to tactical commands, and perfect communication discipline." Any questions? Sarah had no questions about the mission parameters, but she was curious about Weber's tactical preferences and communication procedures. She spent additional time after the briefing discussing ham signals, radio protocols, and emergency procedures with the German major. Her thoroughness impressed Weber, who was accustomed to working with pilots who assumed they already knew everything they needed to know. The mission launch was complicated by deteriorating weather conditions that pushed the limits of operational minimums. Low clouds and gusty crosswinds made takeoff challenging, and the formation had to climb through several thousand feet of turbulent air before reaching clear skies above the weather.
Sarah's aircraft handling skills were tested immediately as she worked to maintain precise formation position despite the difficult conditions. As they approached the target area, the complexity of the mission became apparent. The mountainous terrain created radar shadows that made it difficult to maintain contact with ground controllers, while the simulated missile threats required constant maneuvering that made precision weapon delivery extremely challenging. Weber's formation had to coordinate with ground forces whose position was not precisely known, while avoiding simulated enemy air defenses and maintaining deconfliction with other aircraft operating in the same general area. Sarah's performance during this mission would later be cited as a turning point in her development as a pilot and potential leader. When communication problems prevented the formation from receiving updated target coordinates, Sarah took the initiative to establish contact with ground forces using backup radio frequencies that she had researched during her mission preparation. Her proactive communication allowed the formation to complete their mission objectives despite the technical difficulties. More impressively, when one of the other wingmen experienced navigation equipment failure in the challenging mountain terrain, Sarah volunteered to escort the disabled aircraft back to base while Weber and the remaining aircraft completed the mission. Her decision demonstrated both tactical awareness and the kind of selfless dedication to fellow pilots that marked the best military aviators. Weber was impressed enough by Sarah's performance to request her specifically for subsequent missions during the exercise. "Your Sticky Six has the right attitude," he told Morrison during a casual conversation in the officers' club. "She prepares thoroughly, communicates clearly, and makes good decisions under pressure. Those are exactly the qualities we need in pilots who might face real combat situations." The international recognition Sarah was receiving didn't go unnoticed by her American superiors. Colonel Hayes began including her in mission planning sessions normally reserved for more senior pilots, recognizing that her methodical approach and attention to detail could contribute to overall mission success. Sarah's insights during these planning sessions were often valuable, particularly when it came to anticipating potential problems and developing contingency procedures. As the deployment continued, Sarah found herself being assigned increasingly challenging and important missions. She flew night missions in difficult weather, participated in complex electronic warfare exercises, and served as a wingman for visiting senior officers who were observing the exercises. Each mission added to her experience base and reinforced her reputation as a reliable and competent pilot. But, perhaps most importantly, Sarah was beginning to develop the confidence and leadership instincts that would serve her well in future assignments. She started mentoring newer pilots who arrived at the base, sharing the lessons she had learned about international operations and complex mission planning. Her ability to explain difficult concepts clearly and her willingness to share knowledge earned her respect from pilots of all experience levels. The transformation in how others viewed Sarah's nickname became complete during a mission debrief that included pilots from multiple nations. When a Polish pilot complimented the precision of Sticky Six's formation flying, a German pilot responded that the call sign was perfect because once she commits to a task, she doesn't let go until it's done correctly. Morrison realized that what had started as gentle ribbing about Sarah's persistent approach to aerial refueling had evolved into something much more significant. The nickname now represented reliability, competence, and the kind of determination that other pilots wanted on their wing when missions became dangerous and complex. The deployment was scheduled to last 6 months, but intelligence reports suggested that the international situation continued to deteriorate. What had begun as a demonstration of NATO unity was beginning to look like preparation for potential real-world operations. The training exercises became more realistic and more demanding, pushing pilots and aircraft to their operational limits. Sarah found herself being selected for increasingly sensitive missions that went beyond standard training scenarios. These missions involved actual intelligence gathering, reconnaissance of real-world targets, and coordination with ground-based intelligence assets. The line between training and operational missions was blurring, and Sarah realized that her next challenge would test not only her flying skills, but also her ability to perform under the kind of pressure that only comes with real-world consequences. The stage was being set for the mission that would define Sarah's career and transform her nickname from a simple call sign into a symbol of courage and determination that would inspire pilots for generations to come. The emergency briefing was called at 0300 hours on a cold December morning,
that would forever change the meaning of the call sign, Sticky 6. Sarah Martinez had been awakened from deep sleep by the urgent tones of the base-wide alarm system, the same alarm that signaled transitions from training exercises to real-world operations. As she threw on her flight suit and grabbed her gear, she could hear aircraft engines spinning up across the flight line. Clear evidence that this was not another drill. The briefing room was packed with pilots, navigators, intelligence officers, and command personnel when Sarah arrived. The atmosphere was tense and focused in a way she had never experienced before. Colonel Hayes stood at the front of the room with the expression that immediately conveyed the seriousness of the situation they were about to face. "Ladies and gentlemen," Hayes began without preamble, "intelligence sources have confirmed that a commercial airliner with 347 passengers and crew members has been hijacked while en route from Amsterdam to Dubai. The aircraft is currently flying erratic course changes over Eastern European airspace, and initial communication intercepts suggest the hijackers may be planning to use the aircraft as a weapon against a major population center." The room fell silent as the implications of the situation became clear. This was the nightmare scenario that every military pilot had trained for but hoped never to face. A potential terrorist attack using a commercial aircraft filled with innocent civilians. The decisions made in the next few hours could affect the lives of hundreds of people and potentially trigger a major international crisis. Hayes continued with the mission briefing. NATO Command has authorized Operation Guardian Angel, a coordinated response involving fighter aircraft from multiple nations. Our role will be to intercept the hijacked aircraft, establish visual contact, attempt communication with the cockpit, and be prepared to take whatever action becomes necessary to prevent the aircraft from reaching its intended target. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as she processed the magnitude of what they were being asked to do. The potential for tragedy was enormous regardless of how the mission developed. If they were unable to establish communication with the hijackers or convince them to land peacefully, they might be forced to make the most difficult decision any pilot could face: shooting down an aircraft filled with innocent people to prevent an even greater catastrophe. The tactical briefing that followed was comprehensive and sobering. Intelligence estimates suggested the hijacked aircraft was a Boeing 777, with sufficient fuel remaining to reach several major European cities. The hijackers had disabled the aircraft's transponder and were flying unpredictable courses that made interception challenging. Most concerning, radio intercepts suggested they were planning to target either London, Paris, or Berlin, cities with millions of inhabitants who would be at risk if the aircraft was used as a weapon. Captain Morrison was selected to lead the American element of the intercept mission, with Sarah assigned as his wingman. The selection was both an honor and a tremendous responsibility. Morrison's trust in Sarah's abilities had grown significantly during their deployment, but this mission would test both of them in ways that training could never replicate. The pre-flight preparation was unlike anything Sarah had experienced. Beyond the normal checks and procedures, she found herself thinking about the moral and ethical dimensions of what they might be called upon to do. The rules of engagement were clear but devastating. If the hijacked aircraft approached a major population center and refused orders to divert, they were authorized to use lethal force to prevent a catastrophic terrorist attack. Sarah's methodical approach to mission preparation served her well during these difficult moments. She focused on the technical aspects of the intercept procedures, the communication protocols they would use to attempt contact with the hijackers, and the precise flying skills that would be required to maintain safe separation from a large commercial aircraft while operating in potentially hostile airspace. Master Sergeant Rodriguez was waiting by Sarah's aircraft when she arrived for her pre-flight inspection. The veteran maintainer had worked through the night to ensure that every system was functioning perfectly, understanding that this mission would demand flawless performance from both pilot and machine. His expression was serious as he briefed Sarah on the aircraft's status. "She's ready, Lieutenant," Rodriguez said simply. "Every system is green, weapons are armed and checked, and fuel load is maximum. Whatever happens out there, this airplane won't let you down." The takeoff occurred in pre-dawn darkness, with Morrison and Sarah launching as part of a larger formation that included aircraft from Germany, Poland, and the United Kingdom. The international coordination required for the mission was staggering. Multiple air forces operating in the same airspace, sharing intelligence, and coordinating intercept procedures while maintaining the security necessary to prevent the hijackers from monitoring their communications. The initial radar contact with the hijacked aircraft came 90 minutes after takeoff, when ground controllers reported an unidentified aircraft flying erratic courses approximately 200 miles southeast of their position. The aircraft was maintaining an altitude of 35,000 feet, but had made several course changes that suggested the hijackers were either lost or deliberately attempting to confuse pursuing aircraft. Morrison's formation began a careful approach toward the hijacked aircraft, maintaining sufficient distance to avoid alarming the hijackers while positioning themselves to intercept if the aircraft turned toward a populated area. The tension in the cockpit was palpable as Sarah monitored multiple radio frequencies, trying to detect any communications from the hijacked aircraft while maintaining formation position and monitoring the tactical situation. The first visual contact with the hijacked Boeing 777 was both routine and heartbreaking. The large commercial aircraft appeared normal from a distance, flying straight and level at high altitude. But Sarah knew that inside that aircraft were hundreds of frightened passengers who had no idea whether they would survive the next few hours. The weight of responsibility was crushing. Morrison established a loose formation position approximately 2 miles from the hijacked aircraft and began attempting radio contact on emergency frequencies. Unidentified Boeing 777, this is NATO fighter aircraft on your left side. You are flying in restricted airspace and must establish radio contact immediately. Please respond on frequency 121.5 or any frequency you are monitoring. For several minutes, there was no response. The hijacked aircraft continued flying straight and level, apparently ignoring the presence of the fighter aircraft. Sarah maintained her position slightly behind and to the right of Morrison, ready to respond to whatever orders he might give. The silence from the commercial aircraft was ominous. Then, without warning, the hijacked aircraft began a steep diving turn toward the southwest, a course that intelligence analysts quickly determined would take it directly toward Paris. Morrison immediately radioed the course change to ground controllers while beginning to follow the much larger aircraft through its maneuver. Sarah stayed with him, maintaining formation discipline despite the increasing stress of the situation. Guardian Base, Falcon Lead. Morrison transmitted. Bandit is turning toward target area Alpha. Request immediate instructions. The response from ground control was swift and chilling. Falcon Lead, Guardian Base. You are authorized to use any means necessary to prevent Bandit from reaching target area Alpha. Repeat. You are weapons-free if Bandit continues toward populated areas. Sarah felt a cold knot form in her stomach as she realized what those orders meant. If they couldn't convince the hijackers to turn away from Paris, they would be required to shoot down the aircraft, killing everyone aboard to prevent an even greater tragedy. The weight of that potential decision was almost paralyzing. Morrison attempted radio contact again, this time with more urgency in his voice. Boeing 777, you are approaching restricted airspace around a major population center. You must turn away immediately or we will be forced to take action to prevent you from continuing. Please respond and alter your course. Still no response from the hijacked aircraft, which continued its descent toward French airspace. Intelligence reports were now estimating that the aircraft would reach the outskirts of Paris in less than 30 minutes if it maintained its current heading and speed. The French government had been notified and was beginning emergency evacuation procedures in the city center, but there simply wasn't enough time to evacuate millions of people. It was at this critical moment that Sarah noticed something that would change the entire dynamic of the mission. Her methodical approach to observation and analysis, the same traits that had earned her the nickname Sticky Six, revealed a detail that other pilots might have missed. The hijacked aircraft's flight path wasn't entirely steady. There were slight oscillations in heading and altitude that suggested the autopilot was engaged but being overridden by manual inputs. More significantly, Sarah noticed that the aircraft's landing lights were flashing in what appeared to be a pattern. 3 short flashes, followed by 3 long flashes, followed by 3 short flashes again. It was Morse code for SOS, the International Distress Signal. Thunder, Sticky 6, Sarah transmitted. Are you seeing the landing light pattern on the Bandit? It looks like SOS in Morse code. Morrison focused his attention on the hijacked aircraft and quickly confirmed Sarah's observation. The landing lights were indeed flashing the distress pattern. suggesting that someone aboard the aircraft was trying to communicate with the fighter escort. The question was whether it was the hijackers trying to signal their demands or crew members attempting to provide information about the situation aboard the aircraft. Sarah continued monitoring the light pattern while maintaining her formation position. Her father's lessons about listening to what aircraft were trying to tell you suddenly seemed more relevant than ever. The airplane was communicating, but the message was unclear. She began looking for other subtle signs that might provide more information about the situation aboard the hijacked aircraft. The slight variations in the aircraft's flight path became more apparent as Sarah focused her attention on them. The oscillations weren't random. They followed a pattern that suggested someone was fighting for control of the aircraft. The hijackers might not have complete control of the situation, which could explain the erratic course changes and the distress signals. Morrison was thinking along the same lines. If the crew was still fighting for control of the aircraft, there might be opportunities to assist them without resorting to the ultimate sanction of shooting down the plane. But time was running short, and they needed more information quickly. Guardian Base, Falcon Lead, Morrison transmitted. We're observing distress signals from the bandit aircraft and irregular flight patterns that suggest the crew may still be fighting for control. Request permission to move to closer formation to assess the situation more carefully. The response from ground control reflected the desperate nature of the situation. Falcon Lead, approved for close formation assessment. Be advised, bandit aircraft will reach point of no return in 12 minutes. If you cannot confirm crew control by that time, you are directed to prevent the aircraft from continuing. Morrison moved his F-16 to a position approximately 500 feet from the hijacked aircraft's left wing, close enough to see into the cockpit windows. Sarah moved to a corresponding position on the right side, where she could observe the passenger cabin and look for signs of what was happening inside the aircraft. What Sarah saw through the windows of the Boeing 777 would haunt her for the rest of her career, but it also provided the crucial information needed to save hundreds of lives. The passenger cabin was in chaos, with people pressed against the windows and flight attendants moving frantically through the aisles. But more importantly, she could see activity in the cockpit that suggested an active struggle was taking place. The captain of the hijacked aircraft, a veteran pilot named James Richardson, had been waiting for this moment since the hijacking began 4 hours earlier. When he saw the fighter aircraft move into close formation, he knew he had his chance to signal the true situation aboard his aircraft. Using a technique taught in anti-hijacking training courses, Richardson began making subtle control inputs that spelled out a message in Morse code using the aircraft's flight path. Sarah, whose attention to detail had become legendary within her squadron, was the first to recognize what was happening. Thunder. The bandit's flight path is spelling out Morse code. He's transmitting 2 hijackers' cockpit crew fighting need help. The message changed everything. If there were only 2 hijackers and the crew was still fighting, there might be ways to assist without destroying the aircraft. Morrison immediately relayed the information to ground controllers while considering options that might give the crew the advantage they needed to regain control of their aircraft. The solution that emerged was both dangerous and unprecedented. Sarah would move to an extremely close formation position that would allow her to use her aircraft's radar and electronic systems to jam the hijackers' ability to monitor air traffic control frequencies, while Morrison used his aircraft's position to block GPS signals that the hijackers might be using for navigation. The disruption might create enough confusion to give Captain Richardson and his crew the opportunity they needed to overcome their attackers. The maneuver required flying skills that pushed the limits of what was possible in close formation with a commercial aircraft. Sarah had to maintain a position just 50 feet from the Boeing 777's wingtip while matching its speed exactly and coordinating with Richardson's subtle control inputs. The margin for error was virtually non-existent. A mistake by either pilot could result in a mid-air collision that would kill everyone aboard both aircraft. Sarah's nickname had never been more appropriate. Like a pilot maintaining position during aerial refueling, she stuck to her assigned position with absolute precision, making the tiny adjustments necessary to maintain safe separation while maximizing the effectiveness of the electronic jamming. Her father's lessons about developing an intimate relationship with her aircraft served her well as she pushed her F-16 to the limits of its performance envelope. The plan worked. Within minutes of initiating the jamming, Richardson and his crew were able to overcome the hijackers and regain control of their aircraft. The Boeing 777's erratic flight path steadied, and Richardson established radio contact with the fighter escort to confirm that the hijacking was over. NATO fighters. This is United 447, Richardson transmitted, his voice shaking with exhaustion and relief. We have regained control of the aircraft. The hijackers are restrained, and we're ready to proceed to the nearest suitable airport for landing. Sarah's role in the successful resolution of the hijacking would later be recognized with commendations from multiple nations and a promotion that accelerated her career significantly. But for her, the most important recognition came from Captain Richardson himself, who sought her out during the formal debriefing to thank her personally for the skill and courage she had displayed during the most dangerous moments of the mission. The mission had transformed Sarah from a competent young pilot into a leader whose judgment and skills were recognized at the highest levels of military aviation. More importantly, it had transformed the meaning of her call sign from a simple nickname into a symbol of the determination and precision that defined the very best military pilots. The legend of Sticky Six was born not from a single moment of heroism, but from the accumulation of small decisions, careful preparation, and unwavering focus that allowed her to perform at her best when lives depended on her abilities. The mission had ended successfully, but Sarah knew it was only the beginning of greater challenges that would test her leadership and flying skills in ways she could never have imagined. The aftermath of Operation Guardian Angel brought Sarah Martinez a level of recognition that transformed not only her military career, but also her understanding of what it meant to be a leader in the world's most demanding profession. Within weeks of the successful resolution of the hijacking crisis, Sarah found herself being briefed for promotion to captain and selection for the prestigious Fighter Weapons School, an elite program that produced the Air Force's most skilled tactical experts and instructors. The recommendation for Fighter Weapons School came directly from Colonel Hayes, who had observed Sarah's development from a methodical young pilot into someone capable of making life-and-death decisions under impossible pressure. The program, known throughout the Air Force as the premier Advanced Tactical Training Course, accepted fewer than 50 pilots each year from thousands of applicants. Selection was based not only on flying ability, but also on demonstrated leadership potential and the capacity to think strategically about complex operational problems. Martinez has the right combination of technical expertise and tactical judgment, Hayes wrote in her recommendation letter. More importantly, she has demonstrated the ability to maintain focus and make correct decisions when the stakes are highest. The Air Force needs pilots who can think beyond individual mission execution to broader strategic implications, and Lieutenant Martinez has shown that potential repeatedly. The transition period before reporting to Fighter Weapons School gave Sarah time to reflect on how dramatically her career had changed since earning the nickname Sticky Six. What had begun as gentle mockery about her persistent approach to aerial refueling had evolved into recognition as one of the most reliable and competent pilots in her generation. But Sarah understood that with increased recognition came increased responsibility and expectations that would test her in entirely new ways. Captain Morrison, who had been Sarah's mentor and flight lead during the hijacking mission, was also selected for advanced training, in his case, a position as an instructor at the Air Force's test pilot school. During their final mission together before both departed for their new assignments, Morrison shared his perspective on Sarah's remarkable development as a pilot and leader. "When you first joined the squadron, I'll be honest, I wasn't sure what to make of you," Morrison told Sarah as they completed their post-flight inspection. "Your approach was so different from what I expected in a fighter pilot. But I've learned that there are many different ways to excel in this business, and your way works. The key is that you've never compromised on the fundamentals while developing your own style of leadership." Morrison's assessment highlighted an important aspect of Sarah's development that would become crucial in her new role as a weapons school student and future instructor. The best fighter pilots weren't cookie-cutter copies of the same aggressive archetype. They were individuals who had found ways to maximize their unique strengths while mastering the common skills that all tactical aviators required. Sarah's methodical approach and attention to detail had become weapons in themselves, allowing her to excel in situations where other pilots might have been overwhelmed by complexity. The Fighter Weapons School was located at Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, a sprawling installation that served as the Air Force's premier center for advanced tactical training. The base was home to multiple specialized squadrons, advanced aircraft systems, and training ranges that allowed pilots to practice the most complex and demanding scenarios they might face in actual combat. The scale and sophistication of the operation was immediately apparent to Sarah when she arrived for her initial briefing. The student body for Sarah's class represented the most promising tactical aviators from across the Air Force. Pilots who had been selected came from different backgrounds and aircraft types, but all had demonstrated exceptional ability and leadership potential during their initial assignments. Sarah was one of only 3 women in a class of 48 students, reflecting both the continuing gender imbalance in fighter aviation and the exceptional standards required for selection. The academic curriculum was intense and comprehensive, covering everything from advanced aircraft systems to strategic planning and international relations. Students were expected to master not only the technical aspects of modern air warfare, but also the broader context in which military operations occurred. Sarah found herself studying subjects ranging from electronic warfare theory to diplomatic protocols, preparing for leadership roles that would require understanding complex political and strategic factors. But it was in the flying portion of the curriculum that Sarah's unique approach would be most severely tested. Fighter weapons school training scenarios were designed to push pilots beyond their comfort zones, forcing them to make decisions under pressure while managing multiple competing priorities. The missions were significantly more complex than standard squadron training, involving multiple aircraft types, simulated enemy threats, and realistic constraints that mirrored actual combat conditions. Sarah's first major test came during a mission that required her to lead a mixed formation of fighters and attack aircraft against a heavily defended target complex. The scenario included surface-to-air missile sites, enemy fighter aircraft, electronic jamming, and strict rules of engagement that prohibited civilian casualties. The mission planning alone required over 6 hours of detailed analysis and coordination between different aircraft types and weapon systems. The mission's complexity was intentionally overwhelming, designed to identify students who could maintain situational awareness and make sound tactical decisions even when faced with more information than they could possibly process completely. Many students struggled with this challenge, becoming fixated on individual aspects of the mission while losing sight of the overall objectives. Sarah's methodical approach proved invaluable in this environment. Her habit of breaking complex problems into manageable components allowed her to develop a mission plan that addressed the most critical elements while maintaining flexibility for unexpected developments. More importantly, her ability to communicate complex tactical concepts clearly made her an effective briefer and coordinator for the other pilots involved in the mission. The execution of the mission tested every aspect of Sarah's flying and leadership abilities. As mission commander, she was responsible not only for her own aircraft, but also for coordinating the actions of 7 other pilots, operating different aircraft types with varying capabilities and limitations. The enemy defenses were sophisticated and well coordinated, requiring constant tactical adjustments to avoid simulated surface-to-air missiles, while maintaining the formation integrity necessary for successful target engagement. Sarah's performance during this mission would later be cited as an example of exceptional tactical leadership by the instructors at Fighter Weapons School. When electronic jamming prevented normal radio communication between formation elements, Sarah adapted by using visual signals and backup communication procedures that kept the mission on track. When unexpected enemy fighter aircraft appeared in the target area, she quickly reorganized her formation to address the new threat while maintaining focus on the primary mission objectives. Most impressively, when one of the attack aircraft in her formation experienced a simulated system failure that prevented weapon delivery, Sarah made the immediate decision to adjust the mission plan, redistributing targets among the remaining aircraft while providing escort for the disabled aircraft's return to base. Her ability to adapt quickly to changing circumstances while maintaining overall mission success demonstrated exactly the kind of tactical flexibility that the weapons school was designed to develop. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Hawk Jensen, the chief instructor for Sarah's class, was particularly impressed by her performance. Jensen was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who had trained hundreds of pilots during his career at the weapons school. His standards were extremely high, and his approval was difficult to earn. "Martinez brings something different to tactical aviation," Jensen told his instructor staff during an evaluation meeting. "She's not the most naturally aggressive pilot I've seen, but her preparation is flawless and her execution is consistently excellent. More importantly, she has the ability to see the big picture while managing details that other pilots miss. That's exactly what we need in our future leaders." Jensen's assessment reflected a growing recognition within the Air Force that the nature of modern air warfare required tactical leaders who could think strategically about complex operational problems. The days when individual pilot skill and aggressiveness were sufficient for success were giving way to an environment where mission success depended on coordination, planning, and the ability to integrate multiple systems and platforms effectively. Sarah's success at Fighter Weapons School led to her selection for increasingly demanding roles within the program. She was chosen to serve as a flight lead for newer students, helping them develop the tactical judgment and leadership skills that the program was designed to instill. Her teaching ability proved as exceptional as her flying skills, and she developed a reputation for being able to explain complex tactical concepts in ways that helped struggling students understand and master difficult material. The mentoring role also helped Sarah develop her own leadership philosophy. She had learned from Captain Morrison that effective leadership in aviation required balancing individual development with mission requirements. Pilots had to be challenged and pushed beyond their comfort zones, but they also needed to understand that their leaders were invested in their success and development. Sarah's approach to instruction reflected the same methodical preparation that characterized her flying. She developed detailed lesson plans that broke complex tactical problems into understandable components, and she spent extra time with students who were struggling to grasp difficult concepts. Her patient approach was particularly effective with pilots who, like herself, didn't fit the traditional fighter pilot mold but possessed other qualities that could make them successful. One of Sarah's students, Lieutenant Marcus Ghost Williams, was a quiet, analytical pilot who had struggled with the aggressive decision-making that Fighter Weapons School demanded. Williams was technically proficient and possessed excellent flying skills, but he hesitated at crucial moments when quick tactical decisions were required. Other instructors had labeled him as lacking the killer instinct necessary for tactical aviation. Sarah recognized in Williams some of the same qualities that had once caused Captain Morrison to question her own potential. Rather than accepting the conventional assessment, she worked with Williams to develop tactical decision-making processes that played to his analytical strengths while addressing his tendency toward hesitation. She helped him understand that aggressive tactics didn't necessarily require aggressive personalities. They required clear thinking and decisive execution based on thorough preparation. The breakthrough came during a complex air-to-air training mission where Williams was required to engage multiple enemy aircraft while coordinating with other friendly fighters. Instead of trying to force him into a more aggressive communication style, Sarah had worked with him to develop a tactical vocabulary that allowed him to communicate decisions quickly and clearly while maintaining his naturally calm demeanor. Williams' successful completion of the program validated Sarah's approach to instruction and reinforced her growing reputation as an exceptional teacher and mentor. More importantly, it demonstrated her ability to identify potential in pilots who might otherwise have been overlooked, a skill that would prove invaluable in her future leadership roles. The graduation ceremony for Sarah's Fighter Weapons School class was attended by senior officers from across the Air Force, including several general officers who were responsible for tactical aviation policy and planning. The ceremony represented not only the completion of an intensive training program, but also the formal recognition of Sarah and her classmates as the Air Force's newest tactical experts and future leaders. Sarah's selection as the distinguished graduate of her class was both an honor and a responsibility. The award was given to the student who had demonstrated the highest level of overall performance in academics, flying, and leadership during the 6-month program. Winners of the award were typically selected for the most challenging and important assignments in tactical aviation, and they were expected to serve as examples for future classes of students. The award citation recognized Sarah's exceptional performance in all phases of the program, but it specifically mentioned her ability to think strategically about tactical problems while maintaining the attention to detail necessary for mission success. The recognition validated her approach to aviation leadership and established her as one of the rising stars in the Air Force's tactical aviation community. But perhaps the most meaningful recognition came from her fellow students, who had voted her as the pilot they would most want to have leading them in actual combat operations. The peer recognition reflected not only respect for her flying abilities, but also trust in her judgment and decision-making under pressure. In a profession where trust literally meant the difference between life and death, there could be no higher compliment. As Sarah prepared for her next assignment, a position as a flight commander in one of the Air Force's premier fighter squadrons, She reflected on how far she had come since earning her wings and the nickname that had once embarrassed her. Sticky Six was now associated with excellence, reliability, and the kind of leadership that inspired confidence in the most demanding operational environments. The lessons learned at fighter weapons school had prepared Sarah for the challenges that lay ahead, but they had also reinforced the fundamental approach that had made her successful from the beginning of her career. Thorough preparation, attention to detail, and the ability to remain focused under pressure remained the foundation of her success, even as she took on greater responsibilities and faced more complex challenges. The next phase of Sarah's career would test not only her individual abilities but also her capacity to lead others in situations where the margin for error was minimal and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. The nickname Sticky Six was about to become synonymous with the kind of leadership that military aviators would study and emulate for decades to come. Captain Sarah Sticky Six Martinez stood before the newest class of fighter pilot candidates at undergraduate pilot training, watching the mixture of excitement and nervousness in their young faces that brought back vivid memories of her own journey from uncertain student to respected leader. 5 years had passed since the hijacking incident that had made her famous throughout military aviation circles, and 3 years since her graduation as distinguished graduate from fighter weapons school. Now, as the youngest squadron operations officer in the Air Force, she had been selected to deliver the keynote address to the graduating class, an honor reserved for the most exemplary pilots of each generation. The transformation in how others perceived Sarah's nickname was complete and profound. Sticky Six was now spoken with reverence rather than amusement, representing the highest ideals of military aviation: precision, persistence, and the ability to perform under pressure when lives hung in the balance. Flight instructors used her story as an example of how apparent weaknesses could become strengths when properly developed, and her tactical innovations had been incorporated into training curricula at bases around the world. But Sarah's greatest impact had come through her role as a mentor and leader for the next generation of military aviators. In her current position as operations officer for the 421st Fighter Squadron, she was responsible for the tactical development and operational readiness of 24 F-35 Lightning II pilots, the newest and most advanced fighter aircraft in the Air Force inventory. The responsibility was enormous, as the squadron was tasked with some of the most sensitive and critical missions in modern air warfare. The F-35 program had been controversial and challenging, with technical problems and cost overruns that had drawn criticism from Congress and defense analysts. But the aircraft's revolutionary sensor systems and stealth capabilities represented the future of tactical aviation, and pilots who mastered its complex systems would dominate aerial warfare for decades to come. Sarah had been selected for F-35 transition training based on her exceptional performance at fighter weapons school and her demonstrated ability to understand and integrate complex technological systems. The transition from the relatively simple F-16 to the sophisticated F-35 had challenged even Sarah's methodical approach to aircraft systems. The Lightning II incorporated artificial intelligence systems that could process information faster than human pilots could comprehend, sensor arrays that could detect and track hundreds of targets simultaneously, and network integration capabilities that shared information instantaneously across multiple platforms. Learning to work effectively with these systems required a fundamental shift in how pilots thought about air warfare. Sarah's background in detailed systems analysis proved invaluable in mastering the F-35's capabilities. While some pilots struggled with information overload from the aircraft's sensor systems, Sarah developed techniques for filtering and prioritizing the massive amounts of data available to help maintain situational awareness without becoming overwhelmed. Her methodical approach to understanding aircraft systems allowed her to identify ways to optimize the F-35's performance that other pilots had missed. More importantly, Sarah recognized that the F-35's advanced capabilities required new approaches to tactical leadership and mission planning. The aircraft's ability to operate as part of a networked system meant that individual pilots had to think beyond their own immediate tactical situation to consider how their actions affected the broader operational picture. This required exactly the kind of strategic thinking and attention to detail that had always characterized Sarah's approach to aviation. Lieutenant Colonel Patricia Shaw, Sarah's commanding officer in the 421st Fighter Squadron,
had specifically requested Sarah for the operations officer position based on her reputation for developing innovative tactical procedures and her exceptional ability to train other pilots. Shaw was a veteran of multiple combat deployments who understood that the Air Force's transition to fifth-generation aircraft required leaders who could think creatively about new tactical problems while maintaining the discipline and attention to detail that had always characterized successful military aviation. Martinez brings exactly what we need for the F-35 program, Shaw told the wing commander during Sarah's assignment briefing. She has the technical expertise to understand complex systems, the tactical knowledge to employ them effectively, and the leadership ability to train others to do the same. Most importantly, she has proven that she can perform under pressure when real-world consequences are at stake. Shaw's assessment proved accurate, as Sarah began developing training programs and tactical procedures specifically designed for F-35 operations. Her methodical approach to problem-solving led to innovations in sensor employment, weapons integration, and multi-platform coordination that significantly improved the squadron's operational effectiveness. Several of her tactical developments were later adopted as standard procedures by other F-35 units around the world. But Sarah's most significant contribution came through her work with young pilots who were struggling to adapt to the F-35's complex systems and capabilities. The transition from older generation fighters to the Lightning II was challenging for even experienced pilots, and many found themselves overwhelmed by the aircraft's advanced technology. Sarah developed specialized training programs that helped pilots understand not just how the systems worked, but why they were designed the way they were, and how to employ them most effectively. One of Sarah's most successful students was First Lieutenant David Phoenix Chen, a recent graduate from pilot training who had been assigned to the F-35 as his first operational aircraft. Chen was technically proficient and possessed excellent flying skills, but he struggled with the tactical decision-making required to employ the F-35's advanced sensors and weapons systems effectively. The complexity of the aircraft's capabilities seemed to paralyze him during training missions, preventing him from making the quick decisions that modern air warfare demanded. Sarah recognized that Chen's analytical nature was actually an asset that could be developed rather than a weakness that needed to be overcome. Instead of trying to force him into faster decision-making cycles, she worked with him to develop systematic approaches to processing the F-35's sensor information that played to his strengths while ensuring he could make tactical decisions quickly enough for operational effectiveness. The breakthrough came during a complex training mission that required Chen to coordinate with ground forces while engaging multiple air and surface targets in a high-threat environment. Using the systematic approach Sarah had taught him, Chen was able to process the massive amounts of information available from his aircraft's sensors, prioritize targets based on threat level and mission objectives, and coordinate effectively with other aircraft and ground units to achieve mission success. Chen's successful development validated Sarah's approach to F-35 training and led to her selection to develop training programs for the entire F-35 community. Her work became the foundation for tactical employment procedures that were used by F-35 units throughout the Air Force, and her training methods were adopted by international partners who were also transitioning to the Lightning II. The recognition of Sarah's contributions to F-35 development led to her selection for promotion to major at the earliest possible point in her career. The promotion was accompanied by assignment as the deputy commander of a composite wing that included both F-35 and F-22 Raptor squadrons, a position that made her one of the youngest wing-level leaders in the Air Force and positioned her for eventual command of her own wing. But perhaps more significantly, Sarah's story had become an inspiration for military aviators around the world. Her journey from a young pilot who struggled with aerial refueling to one of the most respected tactical experts in the Air Force demonstrated that success in aviation came not from conforming to stereotypical expectations, but from developing individual strengths while mastering fundamental skills. The nickname Sticky Six had become synonymous with persistence, excellence, and the kind of leadership that inspired others to achieve their own potential. The speech Sarah delivered to the graduating pilot training class reflected the lessons she had learned throughout her career and the values she hoped to pass on to the next generation of military aviators. She spoke about the importance of thorough preparation, attention to detail, and the willingness to learn from both successes and failures.
But most importantly, she emphasized that true leadership in aviation came from helping others achieve their potential rather than simply demonstrating individual competence.